Hello, everyone. This is Raymond Harrison, Senior Associate Athletic Director at NC State University. I'm here on the One Question Leadership podcast. I believe leadership is a reflective process, and it's an ever-evolving process. We should not be the same leader yesterday as we were the day before. We want to continue to grow, and the best way to grow is always putting a mirror up to where we are, understanding our blind spots, understanding who we're continuing to become. And I think that impacts the people that are around us. I learned a bunch from the Pathway program, and that's exactly what that process was for me. It truly helped me dive down deeper and really deal with some things that sometimes we may gloss over. It helped me look internal to understand some things about myself that affected my role as a leader, whether that's at home or in the job. And all of this is possible because of my opportunity to go through the NCAA Leadership Pathway program, coupled with the experience that I've had in the industry. Enjoy the episode.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Our guest today is Dr. Stephany Coakley. Stephany is the Senior Associate Athletics Director for Mental Health, Wellness, and Performance at Temple University. Greetings, Stephany. Thanks for joining us.
Greetings, Ty, and thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Now, you've been in this role for roughly 6 years in full-time role with college athletics, but I think you've done a lot of consulting in terms of college athletics in the past. You're a certified mental health performance consultant, licensed professional counselor. You have experience with mental performance and extensive work with veterans. You've worked with the NFL, the Philadelphia Eagles specifically. You've done some work with the NBA Draft Combine and have worked with Olympic athletes. And you've been in counseling and sports performance for roughly 20 years. So you have a wealth of experience across a number of different industries and venues with athletes, with veterans. And a lot of those things are kind of what I want to talk to you about today. The first question I guess I'll ask you, though, is if somebody were to ask you what it is you do, how would you describe the role you play, I guess, within the world?
Well, okay. Well, that's a good question, Ty. I explained that I help people master the mental and emotional aspects of performing consistently at a high level.
Okay.
That is my spiel. But if you ask me what I do at Temple, I'm the Senior Associate Athletic Director. I'm responsible for the mental health and well-being of about 550-ish student athletes. And that's what I do.
Okay.
My role is to help people master the mental and emotional aspects of performing at a high level consistently.
Master the mental and emotional aspects of performing at a high level consistently. And that is just existing as a human, whether it be in sports, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
I'm going to say that one more time to make sure I got it. Actually, you tell me one more time.
I help people learn to master the mental and emotional aspects of performing consistently at a high level.
Yeah, I like that. It sounds like a purpose for being, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Which is excellent. So over the past few years, really throughout time, but specifically in the past few years, there's this overlap between mental performance, mental health, and what student athletes do, or people who participate in sports. And I wonder about that overlap when you were working with people in the military. Like, was it the same type of thing, I guess, tying back to the purpose you just told us, or did it differ because military is a bit different in terms of what they have to do? Absolutely.
When I worked with the military, the purpose was to help soldiers master the mental and emotional aspects of performing at a high level. Mm-hmm. And there was no crossover for me in that role. I was purely a performance expert. Actually, my title there was Master Resilience Trainer / Performance Expert. And it was all things performance, helping soldiers manage their attention, manage their emotions, manage their thoughts, just manage and master those processes so that they could do what they have been trained to do and return safely with few or no casualties.
Military is interesting because a lot of veterans don't like to cross into the mental health part of their role because it can affect their ability, A, to perform, but B, to continue being in the active in the military. I wonder about, did you ever see the back end? Like you help them so that they can go out and perform, they come see you and they go out and execute at a high level. Did you ever see them later? Because there's always this follow-up aspect, but I guess if that wasn't your role, it's not necessarily a role you played then, right?
It was rare that I saw a soldier or a unit later. So we prepare them mentally. We coach or train the mental skills pre-deployment or pre whatever they were getting ready to do. And it was rare that we would see them on the back end. But I was one of the few, the first sets of people to do this in the military. And now they have changed it where the model is more you're embedded, just like I'm embedded in the athletic department now. So now the model is where you would prepare them before deployment, and then you would see them when they came back. But when I worked with the military, it was not like that.
Yeah, they probably, I know in the past, the military probably didn't even acknowledge when they came back, right, and what they were dealing with. It's interesting. So I guess the biggest difference here is you're embedded, right? And so you see the athletes when they come in there's actually a whole bunch of analogies here, right? When they come in as a freshman, right? So actually college athlete, you see them before practice, after practice, before game, after game, and then as they go on into transitioning to not particularly being a student athlete anymore. So there's a whole lot of entrance and exit outcomes that you're helping them to evaluate amongst themselves. Talk a little bit about that in terms of the 6 years you've been in college athletics.
Well, so it's lovely to be able to be in that full cycle with a person. And when we talk about student athlete, they are more than a student athlete. And so I definitely try to encourage them to embrace that kind of notion. But then this whole cycle, before they're a student, I see them, I see what level of confidence they come in with, what level of anxiety they come in with. As a matter of fact, that's something that we do. We do a lot of testing, pre-performance mental health testing. And when I say a lot, we do it once so we can get baseline to see what levels are like. And then that's how we assess if somebody needs some mental health counseling, we can intervene before the real need to intervene exists. Mm-hmm. So I see somebody come in, their confidence is great, but their attention is poor and their performing under pressure is not great. And then we're able to use that to launch into like the coaching.
Right.
I do that with teams. I do that with individuals. And then, I'm constantly assessing like that. That's how we get better. So we'll do at the end of the semester, at the end of the season. As a matter of fact, today is the last day of the semester. So tomorrow we will send out our end of year or end of semester. Actually, we do it every semester, end of semester evaluations for any student athlete who has come for mental health services. But one of the things that we're going to add this year is we are going to assess those who didn't come to find out what the barriers are, if there are things that we are missing, because we always just ask the people who come, but we're not getting all the information if we really want to improve.
So you'll sit down with every student athlete?
I wish. No. We send out a link.
Oh, okay.
The pre-participation mental health screener is a 24-question survey, and it addresses about 14 different mental health concerns: sleep, anxiety, depression, dissociation, mania, things like that, substance, eating, and then we get that baseline. So, and then that follows, like I said, we do that every year. So even if you came in as a freshman, you were fine, no concerns. You do it a sophomore year. If you're fine, no concerns, keep it going. But let's just say junior year, you come in and your sleep is poor, your connections are poor, your anxiety is increased, your depression is increased. Now something's changed from the beginning of sophomore year to beginning of junior year that we can pinpoint.
Yeah, let's lean into what changed here. So, but in terms of the exit, this being the last day of the semester, you guys will survey everyone, and including in that survey will be, how come you didn't use our services?
We will survey everybody, and this one is only like 5 or 6 questions. What was your experience like? How have your symptoms, whatever you came to get mental health counseling for, how are your symptoms? Have they improved? How often were you coming? How is the environment? You didn't want to find out like what your experience was like here, and if you need, and whether or not, like, are you terminating or will you continue?
Right. Okay. That's excellent. Now there's this aspect of I think you mentioned in my mind, people who don't use the services, right? So then, you don't want to probe or you don't want to chase anybody down, but how do you figure out if someone was hesitant and probably needed the services, or is there a way to do that?
So we will send an email to everybody asking them for information to help us to get better so we can serve student athletes at an even higher level. Some people will respond and they will say, I'm thinking that they might say, well, I don't want to go there because my coach will find out.
Oh, okay.
And then if that's the case, which is not true, right? But if that's the case, then we can start doing some education about confidentiality and what it means to be able to come to a safe space and have conversations with a clinician and with whom that information is.
I think that's excellent. Thinking about your experience in sports psychology and counseling and performance, I wonder, now you have a trained eye, but I guess a coach with some experience would have some semblance of a trained eye in terms of knowing if something is wrong with one of their players. But I wonder if there are some type of common signs that somebody who is not trained in sports psychology, who's not trained in counseling and mental health and performance, is there a way to identify the point when anxiety about performance, we're talking about student athletes here, possibly can create anxieties in life performance within student athletes, if that question makes sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are indicators that the anxiety is preventing a student athlete from doing something at the levels at which they were previously doing it. So we use a continuum of wellness. So I do a lot of education as a clinician. And so I have this continuum, and on the continuum, it indicates things like changes in mood, changes in behavior, changes in thoughts. So a coach might see a change in behavior, somebody who's usually bubbly or engaging with their teammates, who is no longer doing that. But when you talk about anxiety, they might observe the student athlete pacing a lot. And that's just not something they noticed before.
Right.
Or they might actually, their thoughts, they might even say like, I'm so scared. I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous. I don't know what happened. I was so nervous before that would be an indicator. If they're saying it, there it is. Not hard. And then, so we talked about mood, we talked about behavior, and we talked about thoughts. So there are indicators, and those are the three places it'll show up: behavior, mood, and thoughts.
Right. And thoughts. Yeah, that's interesting. And you have created an educational apparatus so that staff, other student athletes, and coaches know how to look for those types of indicators.
Absolutely. And then on the continuum, it says for somebody who may benefit but not necessarily need mental health counseling because their symptoms are not extensive for a long time. The operative word is occasionally. But for the other parts of the continuum, it's persistent and extreme. So when you see something persistently happening, there's an issue. Or certainly extreme, there's an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And you'll have to forgive me, but I call it an apparatus, but the educational apparatus that you have to have is, well, two questions. Is that something that you implemented in the 6 years that you've been at Temple? And then also, how does it work? Are you having seminars for coaches and staff, or how does that aspect work?
I'm glad you asked. The answer to the question is yes.
Okay.
The continuum of wellness is something that I created, and really and truly, it's a continuum with some emojis.
Okay.
So it's nothing too high tech, but it speaks the language of today's youth, emojis. And under the emojis are the indicators. So occasional sleeplessness, occasional procrastination, occasional isolation, occasional. And then under somebody who is having some clinical symptoms, persistent feelings of hopelessness and helplessness, persistent insomnia, persistent anger or irritability, persistent. And then similarly for extreme. And so I created that. That's something that is in our training rooms and our academic center, and it's on Teamworks. Every month since I started the job, I do a session for coaches called WISE. So Temple's mascot is the owl. So we'll take on that, and it stands for Wellness and Sport and Education. So these WISE sessions are only for coaches and administrators to give them some tools, to give them some language, to give them some insight about mental health, because we all have different, unless you're trained, we have all these different myths and beliefs about mental health that more often than not don't help. So I want to put our coaches and administrators in a place of knowledge and understanding about the issues, and also recognizing that because if somebody has a mental health issue, if they're diagnosed with depression or anxiety or a disordered eating, does not have to be permanent. People live every single day in the United States, all over the world, who are clinically diagnosed with a mental health condition, who are being treated, and who are fine, who are functioning in their roles. So just giving coaches some of that insight, coaches and administrators. One of the things that we're doing this summer, I'm very excited to say that all of our coaches and all our staff is getting mental health first aid training, which is pretty extensive training. And prior to this, every year, folks got QPR training, which was suicide intervention training, helping people learn how to ask the question to get people help that they need. Mental health first aid is about more than suicide, and it's about being good listeners. It's about knowing what questions to ask, and it's about giving people a little bit of confidence to help somebody who might be experiencing mental health, and also discern whether somebody's just having a bad day or not by some of the questions they ask, instead of jumping to conclusions and thinking Stephany needs to go see Stephany because she's, was irritable. She's been irritable. No, is that a clinical thing, or is it a acute thing? And is it a bad day?
Yeah, I think that's excellent. Tell me what Y stands for again.
Wellness and Sport and Education.
Wellness and Sport and Education. So I imagine with this WISE system framework that you are creating a common language, right? Which is how you develop a culture, right? Create a common language, which is a culture for understanding how to identify if something is happening with someone, and all the coaches and administrators are on the same page with that. Are these monthly educational sessions, are they mandatory, or how do people show up to them? Is that something that...
A great question. Yeah. They are not mandatory. So mental health first aid is mandatory. Okay. The QPR trainings that we did, the suicide intervention, those were mandatory. But the monthly ones, we do 8 a year. Those are not mandatory. Coaches show up to them. They're all invited to them. They all know they're the second Tuesday of every month at 11 o'clock. That's when they are. Mm-hmm. And based on the coach's schedule, practice schedule, training schedule, competition and all that, they show up. Since COVID, we've been recording them. Mm-hmm. So we have a database, if you will, of all the WISE sessions. So obviously it's better to be in person, because then you can ask the questions that you need for the clarification on. It's also great because you can hear what your peers, your peers in coaching are experiencing. When you think, oh man, I had this one student athlete, and oh man, I was really concerned about him or her, and I was up all night worrying. And then you might hear about one of your peers who's got 4 student athletes to that level. and it helps you to put some things into perspective.
Yeah, I think that's excellent, actually. I think the primary example I see, and I don't know if people looked at it the way I looked at it, is with Tom Brady in this retirement fiasco thing over the last couple of years. Here's somebody who has played football, probably if he's 45 or 46, he's probably played football for 40 of those years, or 38 or 39 of those years. And then the last couple of years, retire, not retire, situation at home with his family. And some people look at it as like, hey, man, like just stop playing because your wife, right? I don't know all the personal things that are going on. My perspective is like, I've been doing this for 38, for 39 of 46 years, and I'm supposed to just stop. And I haven't heard anybody talk about the aspect of transitioning for Tom Brady, who's been doing it more than probably 90-something% of his life, right? And so and at a high level, right? Still doing it at a high level. So to just give it up and just say, I'm just going to stop, it's probably not an easy thing. And he is probably going through what we see student athletes go through when they're no longer playing. And I bring that up to say is that separation of a person from an athlete should probably be taught when we're younger, so that when it occurs, it'll probably still be a traumatic situation, but it may not hit as hard. So I wonder, for those who have influence in a student athlete's life, are there methods for helping student athletes understand the difference between who they are and what they do while they're younger, so that when it comes time for them to no longer participate in sport, it won't be as much of a traumatic event?
Well, a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
My dissertation was on sport career transition of NFL athletes.
Okay.
So this is a space that I live in.
Let's do it.
Based on my research, and that was a long time ago, but I don't think many things have changed. It takes at least 12 months to feel as though you have made it through this transition, at least, like minimum 12 months.
Okay.
I presume that the stronger the athletic identity, the longer the career, the higher the accolades, 12 months might not be sufficient. It might be 4 years. It might be 4 or 5 years. So that's one thing to know. So helping people just set their expectation that you're not just going to jump out of soccer after having played for 14, 15 years and then just be okay not playing soccer. Like, you have to rewire and reprogram a whole lot that you didn't even know was being programmed and wired. That takes time. The other thing about career transitions that help to minimize that window of time is preparing for it in advance. Taking time to acquaint yourself with other aspects of your identity, and not just acquaint yourself, but develop other parts of your identity. There are, one of my favorite basketball players, Wayman Tisdale, back in the day. Like, he was a elite basketball player, but he was also an elite musician. Should he not have basketball, he had something else equally as fulfilling, equally as, you have to spend time to be able to be a musician at that level, to be a recording artist. That's what he was. So he had more parts of his identity that were fully formed. Should you have to retire, or which every athlete on the planet, regardless of who you are, you will have to retire. You can do that on your own accord, but oftentimes it happens not on your own accord. You get cut, you become injured. So knowing you don't have that much control over the transition, but you also know it's coming, the planning and the preparation for it is critical. And a part of that planning and preparation is tapping into these other aspects of your identity. So what do you do when you're in the off season? Are you just sport your whole time? Or that might be a good time to tap into, my artist side, or my writing side, or my cooking side, or my whatever side you have. So those are two things. To level set the expectation that it's not going to be a 1 month 3-month thing, a minimum of 12 months for planning for it in advance so that you don't feel so lost.
Right, when it happens. I imagine that getting a student athlete or athlete in general to understand what you're saying and execute on the things that you have just said, some it will be easier than others. So what can people who are influential in this student athlete's life do to help them to understand and to prepare for the transition?
I think start having some of the conversations.
Okay.
So some of the conversations I have are student athletes want to know, like, how am I going to stay fit while only training maybe 1 hour a day? So I said, well, what would you have done what would you have tried to do if you weren't required to do strength and conditioning the way you were required to do it? And then they say stuff like, oh, Pilates or Muay Thai or, like whatever they say. We start talking about, okay, where are those things near you? Let's go get a trial of, go to Rumble, a boxing gym, or go to the Pilates studio, or you want to do CrossFit, or like you want to start cycling, sign up for a run. Like, what are some things that you can do to still maintain your fitness? Because at the end of the day, you don't have to train like an athlete to be fit.
Yeah, which is excellent.
Yeah, so that's one thing, to take care of the physical activity piece of it. Then I also say, well, if you didn't have to do 20 hours of your sport while you were a student at Temple, what might you have done? Oh, I would have joined the gardening club, or I would have pledged a fraternity or sorority. Or like I would have, okay. There are grad chapters to these things. Like making a plan, let's talk about it because it's coming. There's no athlete who doesn't not retire. You can come in and out of it as many times as you want, but at some point, it's going to be a real thing. So have some of those conversations, and then when people are able to be fully like I use the word tap in, but when they're able to access and develop other parts of their identity, they're happier. They perform well. They perform very well, because when we can't do something, we feel resentment.
Right.
Which could interfere in our performance. And so just figuring out how to manage all of that, because when you do retire, then you have the stuff you've been working on.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And I think it is helpful that you say, people, the people who have influence in these student athletes' life, to start having these conversations about who else are you, right? You're not just this athlete, tell me who you are versus what you do type situation. Before we wrap on that topic, I started off talking about Tom Brady and, playing football for 40 out of 46 years or however long he's done it, and then doing it at a high level and the difficult of transition. Do you have any thoughts about that? I guess without getting into the personal aspect of whatever that publicly is going on with his career.
I think that he's done a really great job of putting in place the systems that allowed him to have such a long and successful career. And it takes time to set that up post-career. And it just happened for real again a few months ago. Yeah. It's going to take some time for him to put those things in place. When I work with NFL athletes, I said, look, 1 year, don't try to get some rest. Like I know you're used to going hard charging. That's how soldiers are too. So, keep doing that, but don't expect to have it all figured out, because you weren't a Super Bowl champion in a year. So if you want to be a Super Bowl champion of life, it's going to take more than, or I should say the rest of your life. It's going to take more than 1 year.
Yeah.
For him, probably 4 or 5.
Yeah, don't have to have it all figured out immediately, right? Even though somebody like him, the public pressure in the eyes, and they're like, bro, you made all the money and won all the championships, just get over it. It's like, no, it's not that easy, man.
No, and I guess I would like to just actually say that it's not easy.
Right. It's not easy at all. I'll ask this last question, then we'll wrap. This has been an excellent conversation. I noticed while doing some research on you that you're an author of a book called Tai the Dreamer. Tell us about this book. Is it available on Amazon? And what was the motivation for you to write it?
All right. So Tai the Dreamer is a book about a little girl who has dreams. And initially, her dreams, she shares her dreams with her friends at school, and they, in the words of Kobe Bryant, they crush her dreams, they laugh at her. But Tai was not deterred, and she continued. She continued to have these dreams every night, and she was the type of little kid that wanted to share what she dreamed about. It was, people. She didn't have small dreams; she had lofty dreams. So I wrote the book Tai the Dreamer because that's something that we can all relate to. Everybody, once again, has dreamed. And for many of us, when we become adults, we kind of crush our own dreams. So Tai the Dreamer is for young dreamers and dreamers who are young at heart. It is for any age, but it's a children's book. And the other reason I wrote it was because I wanted to celebrate the nurturing aspects of fathers, especially Black fathers, because in the book, her father is her primary caregiver. He's the one who's encouraging her. He's the one who's putting her to bed at night. He is the one who's the nurturer. And I wanted to celebrate that because there are not many instances in our culture where men are celebrated as nurturers. And we have many of them, but they're not celebrated. And particularly in the African American culture, that is not something that we hear celebrated. So I definitely wanted to create something that little people, when we are like, our little kid literature is a lot of how many of our thoughts and beliefs and our dreams are formed through what we see when we're young. And so I wanted to put that into the hearts and minds of many young readers. And I wrote the book when I was a long time ago, actually, when I worked with students who came from very disadvantaged backgrounds, where there were very few fathers and they did not dream at all. And I wanted to write a book for some of those kids as well.
Yeah, which is excellent. And that's available on Amazon. People can get it.
It's on Amazon, yes. It's on Amazon, and it's also with the book distributor Itasca.
Okay.
And please go. Like I said, it's not just for little kids. It's for anybody who just needs to be reminded that I have these dreams. I'm trying to achieve them. Let me go be like Tai. She's out here trying to achieve her dreams.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, Stephany, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast to talk about your purpose, which is helping people to master the mental and emotional aspects of performing consistently at a high level.
Thank you, Tai. I really appreciate the conversation.
Yes, ma'am. That was Dr. Stephany Coakley. Stephany is the author of Tai the Dreamer, and she's also the Senior Associate Athletics Director for Mental Health, Wellness, and Performance at Temple University. And of course, I'm Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.